What if I told you that one simple decision, one quick glance, could alter your life forever? That's exactly what happened to Lot's wife in one of the most famous yet mysterious moments in biblical history. With destruction raining down on Sodom and Gomorrah, she was given a clear, life-saving command. Don't look back. And yet, in that crucial moment, she did. She turned around, and in the blink of an eye, her life was over, transformed into a pillar of salt. But here's the real question. Why? Why did she look back? What was so compelling that she couldn't resist one last look? And more importantly, why do we still find ourselves doing the same thing? How many times have we been told to move on, to stop dwelling on the past, and yet we keep turning our gaze back to what we've left behind? Maybe it's the comfort of what we know, even when it's not good for us. Maybe it's the fear of the unknown, making us hesitate before we take that next step forward. Lot's wife's story might seem like an ancient cautionary tale, but in reality, it speaks to a universal human struggle: letting go. Whether it's a relationship that ended badly, a decision we regret, or a version of ourselves we're not ready to outgrow. We all face moments where looking back seems easier than moving forward. The real tragedy of Lot's wife isn't just that she disobeyed, it's that her inability to let go kept her from stepping into a new life, a new beginning. Join me as we dive deep into this powerful story and explore the reasons behind her fatal decision. We're not just uncovering the past, we're shining a light on the very things that keep us stuck in our own lives. Why do we hold on so tightly to what's behind us? And how can we finally break free to move forward? The answers might surprise you, and what we discover along the way could change the way you see your own journey. Stick around, because we're about to uncover a truth that's as relevant today as it was thousands of years ago. Imagine living in a city where everything around you is chaotic, where right and wrong have become so blurred it feels like the world's completely lost its moral compass. You wake up every day surrounded by noise, distractions, temptations, and it's like the city itself is pulling you in 1,000 different directions. That was Lot's family living in Sodom, a city that was, well, let's just say it wasn't known for its good behavior. It was a place where people had given in to every selfish desire, where corruption and moral decay were as common as the sand in the streets. Now let's set the scene. Picture Lot trying to keep his family grounded while surrounded by a city that had basically lost its way. There were temptations everywhere, and keeping a moral compass in a place like Sodom was like trying to stick to a healthy diet while living in a candy store. You know that moment when you're trying to be good, but the world is screaming at you to indulge? Lot's family was in the thick of it, and despite knowing they didn't belong there, they stayed. But let's talk about how Lot even ended up in this mess. Lot, nephew to Abraham, wasn't always in Sodom. He made the choice to move his family there after separating from Abraham, who gave him the first pick of the land. Lot chose the fertile plains near Sodom and Gomorrah, probably thinking, this is prime real estate, what could go wrong? Little did he know that the price of living in Sodom wasn't just physical, it was spiritual. The city had a way of getting under your skin, the allure of comfort, wealth, and convenience. It was hard to resist, and we all know how that feels, right? We've all had those moments where we choose what looks good over what we know is right, and that's where Lot's wife comes in. Now, we don't know her name, but she was right there in the middle of it all. She lived in Sodom, saw its wealth, its lifestyle, its glamour, and let's face it, it must have been tempting. Even when you know something isn't good for you, it's hard not to be drawn to it, especially when it's all around you, right? Imagine trying to live a wholesome life while everyone around you is saying, come on, live a little. It's like trying to avoid social media drama while your phone keeps lighting up with notifications. Lot's wife had grown attached to Sodom in ways that went beyond just living there. The city had its grip on her, just like the way modern distractions can grip us. You know that feeling when you've got one foot in your goals, but something shiny and distracting keeps pulling you away? Maybe it's binge-watching Netflix when you swore you'd work on that project, or endlessly scrolling social media when you plan to read a book. That's the same pull Lot's wife felt. The tension between what she knew was right and what Sodom offered her. And let's not forget, Sodom wasn't just a regular city, it was bad. Like really bad. The Bible paints a pretty clear picture of its wickedness, saying that the outcry against it was so great that God himself decided to destroy it. And yet, Lot's family was living there, trying to stay above water in a place where the moral ground was sinking fast. It's kind of like living in a modern-day city that thrives on consumerism, materialism, and social pressure. We all face these temptations, don't we? Whether it's keeping up with the latest trends, falling into the hustle culture, or just getting caught up in things that don't align with our values, we feel that same pull every day. But Lot's family, they were in deep. Despite knowing Sodom wasn't the place for them, they had made a life there. And while Lot might have been more focused on maintaining his righteousness, his wife was in the struggle, trying to balance her life in a corrupt city while holding on to some semblance of normalcy. Can you relate to that? Maybe you found yourself in a situation where you're constantly torn between what you know you should do and what everyone else around you is doing. It's tough, isn't it? Especially when the world seems to be running in the opposite direction. For Lot's wife, this pull would soon lead to a moment that would define her forever. As we dive deeper into this story, we're going to explore why she looked back. What was it that made her turn around when she knew what was at stake? It's a question that goes beyond ancient times. It speaks to our own lives where we sometimes look back even when we know we should be moving forward. So stick with me. We've just started uncovering the truth about Lot's wife and the choices she made. What happens next will make you think about your own life and those moments when you feel the pull to look back, even though everything is telling you to keep going forward. And just when life in Sodom was hitting that tipping point of no return, with the corruption and chaos all around, something unexpected happens. One day these two strangers, no ordinary travelers mind you, arrive at Lot's door. Picture it. Lot's in full hospitality mode, bringing them in, offering them food and shelter, not fully realizing that these visitors are actually angels sent to deliver one of the most urgent messages of all time. It wasn't your typical, "Hey, we're just passing through" situation. No, these angels came with a ticking time bomb of a warning. Sodom was about to be obliterated, wiped off the map. Now I imagine Lot's heart sinking at that moment. But then there's Lot's wife, probably in the background thinking, wait, what? Leave? Now? It's hard not to imagine her looking around the house, mentally cataloging all the things she might have to leave behind. But what about my favorite sandals? My best dishes? And I didn't even get to say goodbye to my friends. I mean, think about it. How many of us, in a situation like that, would find our minds darting to the trivial things that don't matter in the grand scheme? It's funny, but also so human. The angels, though, they weren't playing around. They told Lot and his family, in no uncertain terms, that they had to get out of the city and fast. This wasn't a leisurely stroll out of town. This was grab your stuff and run for your life urgency. It's kind of like when someone shouts, "Fire!" and you have 2 seconds to decide whether you're going to save the family photo album or just get out with your life. The angels even said, "Don't look back." Simple enough, right? Except, as we know, it wasn't. And here's the thing. This moment with the angels, it's not that different from situations we face in everyday life. How many times have we been warned about something by a friend, a family member, or even just our gut feeling, and we've ignored it? We see the signs, we get the advice, but we think, "Nah, I'm good, I've got time. It's not that serious." But then, when we find ourselves in trouble, we realize, oh, maybe I should have listened. It's like when the weather report says a huge storm is coming, and instead of preparing, you think, "Hey, I'll deal with it later." And then the next thing you know, your patio furniture is flying down the street. Lot's family was in that exact situation. They had been warned, and now they had to make a decision. Take the warning seriously and leave, or stay in the comfort of what they knew, even if it meant destruction. And I think that's what makes this story so relatable. How often do we find ourselves clinging to something familiar, even when we know it's not good for us, because leaving is just too hard? Lot's wife especially, she's all of us when we feel torn between the life we know and the uncertainty of change. You can picture her hesitation, can't you? Modern Lot's wife would be the woman who's halfway out the door, still scrolling through her phone thinking, do I have time to text my neighbors one last time? What about that Instagram post I didn't finish? There's always that pull to stay where we're comfortable, even when we know we shouldn't. For Lot's wife, it wasn't just about leaving her home. It was about leaving behind the life she had built, the memories, the connections, everything that was familiar. And let's face it, we've all been there in some way. Maybe it's not about leaving a city about to be destroyed, but we've all faced moments where we knew we had to walk away from something, whether it's a toxic relationship, a bad habit, or a job that's draining the life out of us. But the fear of the unknown can be paralyzing, can't it? It's funny to think about how Lot's wife might have reacted when the angels were rushing them out. Maybe she was scrambling, thinking, I didn't pack enough. I can't leave without my favorite dress. And while that might seem lighthearted, it speaks to a bigger truth about human nature. We're often more attached to our comforts than we realize, and that attachment can make it really hard to move forward, even when we know staying will only bring harm. As the angels practically dragged Lot's family out of Sodom, you can feel the tension rising. The clock is ticking, and there's no time to waste. Yet in the back of Lot's wife's mind, you know there's still that pull to look back, to hold on to the life she had known. It's the same pull we feel when we try to move forward, but keep one eye on the past. It's tough. Letting go is hard. So what happens next? We're getting to that moment when Lot's wife makes her fatal decision. But for now, think about the warning signs in your own life. Are there things you know you should leave behind, but you're hesitating because, well, it's comfortable? Stick around, because Lot's wife is about to show us what happens when that hesitation costs you more than you bargained for. The morning light barely cut through the thick clouds of smoke rising from the city as Lot's family bolted from Sodom. Picture the scene: chaos all around, the ground trembling under their feet, and the sky beginning to darken with the impending destruction. You can almost hear the angels shouting, "Move, don't stop, don't look back." The urgency in their voices was impossible to ignore. And Lot's wife? Well, let's just say her sandals probably weren't ideal for running. But when you've got divine messengers telling you to run for your life, fashion takes a backseat. Now imagine being in Lot's wife's position. They're fleeing their home, the place they've lived for years. And even though Sodom was a moral mess, it was still her home. The streets, the people, the life she knew. It's hard to let go of all that, isn't it? We've all been there in some way, right? Running from something we know is bad for us, but a little voice in our head keeps whispering, "Are you sure you want to leave this behind? What if you're giving up something good?" It's like that moment when you decide to quit junk food and then see a commercial for pizza. The temptation to go back is real. So here's Lot's family, literally running for their lives, with everything they've known being destroyed behind them. Lot's wife was told very clearly, "Don't look back." But the pull must have been overwhelming. Imagine being told to flee your home, your friends, your life, all without so much as a glance over your shoulder. How tempting would it be to sneak one last look to see if the world you're leaving behind is really gone? And let's be honest, haven't we all struggled with the temptation to look back, even when we know we shouldn't? Maybe it's checking up on an ex on social media when you know it's a bad idea. Maybe it's lingering in a toxic job or relationship, wondering if you're making the right choice by leaving. We want to move forward, but part of us keeps looking back, hoping we're not missing out on something. For Lot's wife, it wasn't just curiosity, it was attachment. She was leaving behind not just a city, but a way of life she had grown accustomed to. It's like trying to leave behind a bad habit that's become second nature. The longer you've had it, the harder it is to let go. Let's lighten it up a bit. What if, in the midst of this chaos, Lot's wife had those fleeting, random thoughts that we all have in stressful situations? You know, the kind that hit you out of nowhere. Did I forget to grab my favorite shawl? Or even, wait, I didn't finish watering my plants? It's almost comical when you think about the small things that suddenly seem important when we're leaving something behind. Modern Lot's wife would probably be thinking, "Did I leave my phone charger? I need my charger." We all have that one thing we can't seem to part with, even in the face of something as massive as, well, divine destruction. But back to the story. Lot's family is on the move, escaping the destruction, but you can feel the tension building. They've left everything behind, and the temptation to look back must be gnawing at Lot's wife. It's so relatable because how many times in life are we told to move on from something or someone? And yet, there's that little voice inside whispering, just one last look. Whether it's walking away from a bad decision, an unhealthy relationship, or a toxic habit, we feel the pull to go back, even though we know it's not good for us. And in Lot's wife's case, this temptation wasn't just emotional, it was physical. She was told not to look back, but the desire to see what was happening to Sodom must have been intense. Maybe she wanted to know if her friends had made it out. Maybe she just couldn't believe her life was really crumbling behind her. Or maybe she was just attached to the past, to the city, to the comfort of the life she knew. After all, how many of us have stayed in bad situations longer than we should have, because it's easier to stay in the familiar than to face the unknown? Here's the thing. Lot's wife looking back wasn't just about her curiosity, it was about her heart. She couldn't fully let go. And haven't we all been there? Trying to move forward but dragging the past with us, one hesitant glance at a time. It's like trying to run a race while looking over your shoulder. You're not really going to make it to the finish line that way, are you? So here's the question. How often do we try to move on, only to be pulled back by the allure of what we're leaving behind? It's not easy, right? And Lot's wife, well, she's about to show us just how dangerous it can be to look back when we've been called to move forward. Stick with me, because what happens next is the turning point, both for her and for anyone who's ever struggled with the pull of the past. Now we've reached that crucial moment. The family is running, the city is crumbling behind them, and the tension is so thick you could cut it with a knife. Lot's wife, heart pounding, knows what's at stake. The angels had given clear instructions, don't look back. But in that split second, something inside her stirs and she turns around. It's almost like time slows down as she makes that fateful decision. What was it that made her look back? Was it just curiosity, or was there something deeper? Let's dive into that moment and explore what was really going on in her heart. Think about it. Lot's wife had a life in Sodom. Sure, the city had its issues, to say the least, but it was her home. She had friends there, memories, maybe even a sense of comfort in the familiar chaos. And isn't that so relatable? We often find ourselves stuck in situations that aren't exactly ideal, but because it's what we know, we cling to it. Maybe she was thinking about the luxuries of the city, the grand homes, the bustling markets, the comfortable lifestyle. Or perhaps it was the people she was leaving behind. Either way, Sodom was more than just a location for her. It represented everything she was walking away from. How many times have we felt that same pull? It's like trying to leave behind bad habits or toxic relationships. We know we need to move on, but something about the past keeps calling us back. Maybe it's nostalgia, maybe it's fear of the unknown, or honestly, maybe it's just the comfort of what we've gotten used to. Have you ever decided to make a big change, like giving up junk food or cutting down on social media, and found yourself thinking, just one more time, I'll check Instagram just this once before I delete the app? That's the exact moment Lot's wife found herself in. She was leaving behind the life she knew, but it wasn't just physical objects or friends. It was the comfort zone she had grown attached to. Let's be real, stepping into something new, something unknown, is terrifying. It's like quitting a job you've had for years, even though it's not fulfilling, because you're too afraid of what comes next. Lot's wife wasn't just leaving Sodom behind. She was leaving behind everything that had made her feel secure, even if that security was built on shaky ground. And here's the thing. We do this all the time. We hold on to things that no longer serve us because letting go feels like losing a part of ourselves. We cling to bad habits, unhealthy relationships, or even the idea of what could have been, because moving forward means admitting that what's behind us can't come with us. It's like passing a McDonald's on the highway when you're trying to stick to a healthy diet. You know you should keep driving, but the thought of fries, well, you get it. Lot's wife's look back wasn't just a glance. It was a reflection of her internal struggle. She was torn between two worlds, the world she knew and the unknown that lay ahead. And honestly, who can't relate to that? We've all had those moments of hesitation when we're supposed to be moving forward, but part of us is still stuck in the past. Maybe it's checking up on an ex's social media to see how they're doing, even though you swore you'd cut ties. Or maybe it's hanging on to old friendships that are more draining than uplifting, simply because of shared history. The Bible doesn't give us all the details about what was going through Lot's wife's mind, but we can imagine the pull she felt. It's the same pull we feel when we're on the verge of change. It's that voice that whispers, "What if you're making a mistake? What if things were better back there?" It's a seductive thought, one that makes you doubt your decision to move forward. But here's the kicker. When she looked back, it wasn't just a casual glance. It was a turning point, a moment that sealed her fate. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes looking back can cost us more than we realize. Lot's wife didn't just get a second to reflect on the past. She was frozen in it, quite literally turned into a pillar of salt. And that's a warning for all of us. When we spend too much time looking back, we risk getting stuck there. We lose the chance to move forward because we're too focused on what's behind us. It's almost like the story's telling us, hey, don't be so attached to what's behind you that you miss out on what's ahead. Lot's wife wasn't able to embrace the new life she was heading toward because she couldn't fully let go of the old one. And that's where a lot of us get caught too. We're halfway into something new, but we're still holding on to the old, peeking over our shoulder to see if maybe, just maybe, we can have both. So as we think about why Lot's wife looked back, it's not just about curiosity. It's about the internal battle we all face when we're asked to step into the unknown. The past, with all its comfort and familiarity, can feel like a safety net, but sometimes holding on to it can keep us from moving into the future we're meant for. Stick with me, because Lot's wife has more to teach us about letting go of the past and fully embracing the future. Her story isn't just about one moment of disobedience. It's about the struggle we all face when it comes to moving forward and the real consequences of looking back. And then, in that moment of hesitation, it happened. Lot's wife, unable to resist the pull of the past, turned around. The Bible says she became a pillar of salt, frozen in place, staring back at the life she could no longer be part of. Just imagine it, a woman mid-run, pausing to look back at everything she had known, and in an instant, she's gone. Not in a blaze of glory, not in a dramatic collapse, but transformed into salt, a part of the landscape. It's as if the very thing she was holding on to, the past, claimed her. Now let's think about what this means. In that split second of disobedience, Lot's wife experienced the ultimate consequence. The angels had warned them not to look back, but she couldn't help herself. And that's the thing about life, isn't it? Sometimes when we're told not to do something, the temptation becomes even stronger. It's like when someone says, "Don't touch that, it's hot." And your brain immediately says, "How hot are we talking though?" And before you know it, your finger is singed. For Lot's wife, it was more than curiosity. It was attachment, maybe even regret. We've all been there, haven't we? Thinking about what we've left behind and wondering if maybe we should have stayed just a little longer, tried one more time, or made one more effort. But here's the kicker. Sometimes, looking back has consequences. In her case, the consequence was immediate and irreversible. She was transformed into a pillar of salt, a monument to what happens when we're too focused on the past to move forward. Now let's bring this into our own lives. How many times have we found ourselves stuck because we keep looking back? Maybe we're dwelling on past mistakes, unable to forgive ourselves, or we're holding on to old habits that we know aren't good for us. It's like trying to drive a car while constantly looking in the rearview mirror. You're bound to crash. And sure, we're not going to turn into salt, thankfully, but we might find ourselves emotionally frozen, stuck in the same place, unable to move forward because we're too attached to what's behind us. Take relationships, for example. How many people do you know who keep checking up on an ex, even though they know it's over? They're not moving on because part of them is still holding on. Or maybe it's that job you left because it was making you miserable, but now you're questioning your decision, wondering if you made the right call. The past has a way of keeping us in its grip, doesn't it? And let's not forget the humor in all of this. Picture Lot running ahead, probably not even realizing what happened at first. He turns around expecting to see his wife still behind him. But nope, she's a salt sculpture. You can almost imagine his reaction. Well, that's unexpected. It's one of those moments where you know the seriousness of it, but you can't help but think about the absurdity of the situation. Like, of all the things to turn into, why salt? Maybe she was just a little too salty about leaving Sodom behind. But in all seriousness, Lot's wife turning into salt is symbolic of how looking back can solidify us in our past. When we're too focused on what's behind, we can't move forward, and in a way, we become stuck like Lot's wife, unable to progress because we're holding on to something we can't change. The past is what it is. We can't alter it, but we can choose not to let it define us moving forward. Think about the last time you were stuck in a pillar of salt moment. Maybe not physically, but emotionally or mentally. We've all had those moments when we're so fixated on what's behind us that we miss the opportunities right in front of us. Whether it's staying stuck in regret or replaying old scenarios in our heads, the result is the same. We're frozen in place, unable to embrace the present or the future. Lot's wife serves as a reminder that sometimes the only way to truly move forward is to leave the past behind without looking back. Because if we keep turning around, we might just miss out on what's ahead. And let's be real, nobody wants to be a pillar of salt, right? It's better to embrace the unknown future than to be stuck in the certainty of the past. As we keep moving through Lot's story, let's think about our own moments of hesitation, those times we've looked back when we knew we shouldn't have. And let's see how we can learn from Lot's wife's mistake, making sure that when we run from our own Sodom moments, we keep our eyes forward. So here we are. Lot's wife has become the ultimate example of what happens when we cling too tightly to the past. But what's the deeper meaning behind all of this? Why is it so important to keep moving forward without looking back? Not just for Lot's wife, but for us in our everyday lives? Let's unpack it. First off, let's talk about what it means to look back. Spiritually, the act of looking back often symbolizes more than just physical movement. It's about where your heart is. When Lot's wife turned around, she wasn't just curious about the destruction of Sodom. She was emotionally tied to it. Her heart was still in the city, even as her feet were carrying her out of it. And that's a key lesson for all of us. It's one thing to walk away from something, but it's another thing entirely to let it go. How many times have we tried to move on from something, maybe a bad relationship, a failed job, or a big mistake, but we just can't stop thinking about it? We say we're done, but in reality, we're still emotionally connected. It's like when you swear off junk food, but every time you pass by a fast food place, you start reminiscing about the fries you left behind. You're physically walking past it, but mentally, you're still there. And it's not just about food or bad habits. This happens with people and opportunities too. Ever tried to move on from a breakup but keep checking your ex's social media just to see how they're doing? Or maybe you've had a failed business venture, and instead of focusing on the next opportunity, you spend months replaying what went wrong. It's like trying to drive a car forward while staring in the rearview mirror. Spoiler alert, you're going to crash. Lot's wife's story serves as a powerful reminder that moving forward means more than just putting distance between you and the past. It means leaving the past where it belongs, behind you. Her transformation into a pillar of salt shows us what happens when we get stuck looking back. We become frozen, unable to grow or move forward because we're too busy dwelling on what's already gone. And if you've ever spent too long overanalyzing a past decision, you know how it feels to be stuck, like your life is on pause while the rest of the world keeps moving. Now, in today's world, we might not turn into literal pillars of salt, thankfully, but we do get stuck in our own ways. We freeze ourselves emotionally or mentally by refusing to let go. Whether it's holding on to regret, wishing things had gone differently, or constantly second-guessing decisions, the result is the same. We stop moving forward. Let's be real for a second. How many times have you said you were going to give something up, only to sneak back to it when no one's looking? It's like trying to quit sugar but secretly eating a cookie when you think no one will notice, or deciding to finally quit social media, only to find yourself scrolling at 3 a.m., pretending it's just one last time. We all have those moments where we're tempted to look back, even when we know it's not good for us. And it's not just about quitting things, it's about our mindset. When we spend too much time looking at missed opportunities or past failures, we stop seeing the new chances right in front of us. Maybe you didn't get that dream job, but if you keep obsessing over it, you might miss the next opportunity that's even better. Or if you keep thinking about the relationship that didn't work out, you might overlook the person who's standing right in front of you, ready to build something new with you. That's why moving forward is so essential. Spiritually, it's about trusting that God has a plan for us, even when we don't fully understand it. Lot's wife couldn't see what was ahead of her because she was too focused on what she was leaving behind. And honestly, haven't we all been there? Maybe you didn't get the outcome you wanted and you're stuck wondering why things didn't go the way you hoped. But here's the thing. Sometimes the future is even better than what you left behind. You just have to keep your eyes on it long enough to get there. In life, there are always going to be moments when we feel the temptation to look back. But Lot's wife teaches us that the real power comes from pressing forward. It's about recognizing that the past is done, and while it's okay to learn from it, it shouldn't hold us back. If we're constantly looking over our shoulder, we'll miss the amazing things ahead of us. So what's the takeaway here? We've all got our Sodom moments, things we need to leave behind. Maybe it's a bad habit, a mistake, or even a version of ourselves that no longer serves who we want to be. The key is not to get stuck in the past like Lot's wife. Instead, we have to look forward, trusting that what's ahead of us is worth the journey. And hey, maybe it's time to finally delete that ex's number or stop checking the fridge for that one leftover slice of pizza. After all, life's too short to be stuck looking back, right? So let's get into why Lot's wife, and let's be honest, all of us, find it so hard to let go of the past. I mean, seriously, it's like our brains are wired to cling to things even when we know they're not good for us. There's a deep psychological pull that makes us want to hold on, whether it's old habits, past relationships, or even that worn-out sweater in the back of the closet that you haven't worn in 5 years. But you just know you'll need it someday. It's not just about sentimentality, though that plays a part. Psychologists tell us that humans are creatures of habit. We're wired to find comfort in the familiar, even if what's familiar isn't the best for us. It's why we sometimes stay in situations we know aren't healthy, like staying in a dead-end job or hanging onto that old pair of jeans that haven't fit since 2010. There's security in what we know, even if we're unhappy with it. It's why Lot's wife, in that split second, couldn't resist looking back at Sodom. The city represented everything she knew: the life, the people, the comforts. Sure, Sodom was morally bankrupt, but it was her life. And let's face it, we've all had our own Sodom moments. You know, those times when you've promised yourself that you're going to move on, maybe from a bad habit, a toxic friendship, or even an old hobby that no longer brings you joy. But you keep getting pulled back in. It's like trying to declutter your house and saying, okay, I'm finally getting rid of that drawer of mismatched socks. But then you hold up one random sock and think, what if I find the match? So back in the drawer it goes. Lot's wife, looking back, was like holding on to that one sock, convinced it was still worth something, even though it wasn't. Why do we do this? Well, part of it is what psychologists call loss aversion. It's that feeling we get when we'd rather avoid loss than gain something new. We're more scared of losing what we have, even if it's not good for us, than we are excited about the potential of what's ahead. So even though Lot's wife was walking towards safety and a new life, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was losing something by leaving Sodom. That's why she turned around, just to see what she was leaving behind. And come on, haven't we all been there? You're trying to move forward in life, but something about the past just won't let you go. Maybe it's the comfort of familiarity or the fear that moving on means leaving something valuable behind. It's the same reason people hang on to old relationships even when they know it's time to move on. We've all got that friend who keeps texting their ex just to check in, even though everyone knows they need to stop. But hey, it's hard. Letting go of the past isn't just about leaving behind physical things. It's about leaving behind a part of ourselves, our memories, our experiences, our sense of security. I'll share a personal story here. A while ago, I decided to let go of a job that, quite frankly, was draining me. It wasn't the right fit anymore, and I knew I needed to move on. But every time I tried to fully commit to the change, I found myself looking back, wondering if I'd made a mistake. I started remembering all the good moments, ignoring the bad ones, and thinking, what if I just gave it one more try? It was like my brain was playing tricks on me, highlighting all the positive memories while conveniently forgetting why I wanted to leave in the first place. It took me a while to stop looking back and to trust that there was something better ahead. But wow, was it tough? And isn't that what Lot's wife experienced? In that moment, she wasn't just looking at the crumbling city. She was looking at everything she was giving up: her home, her memories, her life as she knew it. That's a hard thing to walk away from, no matter how bad it was. And just like how we hold on to things that no longer serve us, Lot's wife couldn't let go of what Sodom represented for her. Humor helps too. I mean, how many of us have tried to let go of something only to sneak back and take a peek? It's like saying you're going to quit social media but still keeping the app on your phone, just in case. Or deciding you're done with that ex but still glancing at their Instagram stories to see what they're up to. It's funny, but it's also incredibly human. We want to move forward, but we're constantly drawn back to what we know. The truth is, looking back makes us feel safe, even when it's not the best choice. It's like staying in your comfort zone. Sure, it's familiar, but you're not growing. Lot's wife couldn't fully embrace the future because she was too caught up in the past, and that's something we can all relate to. So as we reflect on why Lot's wife looked back, it's not just about curiosity. It's about that deep psychological need to hold on to what we know, even if it's not good for us. Whether it's decluttering our physical space or our emotional baggage, the struggle to let go is real. And while we might not turn into pillars of salt, we do risk getting stuck, unable to move forward. As Lot and his daughters raced away from Sodom, the destruction behind them growing louder with each passing second, there must have been a moment when they realized something was wrong. Lot's wife, she was supposed to be right there with them, but now she wasn't. I imagine Lot glancing over at his daughters, panic slowly settling in as the realization hit that his wife wasn't running beside him anymore. There's nothing more terrifying than running for your life, only to realize that someone you love isn't there. But he couldn't look back. The same angels that had urged them to escape had also commanded them not to turn around, not even for a second. And in that moment, can you picture the emotions running through Lot's mind? Confusion, fear, and maybe even a growing sense of dread as he wondered what had happened. He might have thought, did she fall behind? Did she get lost? But in his heart, he must have known. He had heard the warning. They all had. Do not look back. And yet she had. The weight of that realization must have been crushing, knowing there was nothing he could do now. The only thing he could do was keep moving forward with his daughters, each step pulling him further away from the life he knew and the woman he loved. For Lot's daughters, it must have been equally devastating. They had just watched their entire world crumble behind them. Everything they'd known, gone in an instant. And now their mother, the one who was supposed to be with them through this, was missing. But just like their father, they couldn't look back. Imagine the restraint that took, the desire to turn around, to search for her, to make sure she was okay, while knowing that one glance could be fatal. They had to trust the warning and keep moving, even when every instinct was probably telling them to stop. It's one of those moments that feels surreal, right? Losing someone so suddenly, knowing you can't even stop to check on them. And isn't that something we can all relate to in some way? We've all had moments in life where we've had to leave people behind, not because we wanted to, but because circumstances forced us to move forward. Maybe it's a relationship that ended, a friendship that faded, or even a loved one we've lost. There's this crushing feeling of helplessness, knowing that the person is no longer with you, but you can't turn back. You can't go back and fix it. All you can do is keep moving forward, as hard as that may be. It's like when you lose touch with a friend you thought would be in your life forever, and one day you wake up and realize they're no longer there. You wonder what happened, where they are, and why it turned out this way. But sometimes, even if you want to, you can't go back. Life pulls you forward, whether you're ready or not. It's heartbreaking, but it's a reality we all face at some point. Lot and his daughters must have felt that same heartbreak as they continued their escape. The grief, the uncertainty, the burning question of what if. Maybe they even held on to the faint hope that somehow, by some miracle, she was still there, running behind them, ready to catch up. But they couldn't afford to wait or look back to find out. Their survival depended on moving forward, even if it meant leaving someone behind. It's a painful reminder that life doesn't always give us the luxury of closure. Sometimes we have to keep going without all the answers. We're forced to trust that what's behind us is out of our control, and what matters is the road ahead. And while it's easier said than done, the reality is that there are moments in life when looking back would only cause us more harm, just like it did for Lot's wife. For Lot and his daughters, there was no turning back. They had to continue the journey, carrying the weight of their loss with them. And for the rest of us, it's the same. We can't always go back to check on what we've left behind, no matter how much we want to. But in moving forward, there's hope. Even in the darkest moments, there's always a path ahead, even if it's one we walk with a heavy heart. The story of Lot's wife and her transformation into a pillar of salt is one of the most striking and mysterious moments in the Bible. After that fateful moment, there's not much more said about her. The Bible doesn't give us a lot of details about what became of the pillar of salt itself, but the image is powerful enough that it's echoed in other scriptures and stories throughout time. So, where is this pillar of salt today, and what do we know about it? In terms of physical location, many people believe that the pillar of salt representing Lot's wife is somewhere near the Dead Sea. The Dead Sea is known for its high salt content, and there are natural rock and salt formations along its shorelines. Some travelers have even claimed to have seen a pillar-like formation that they believe could be Lot's wife, though we have no solid evidence that this specific pillar is the one mentioned in the Bible. It's a fascinating thought, though. Imagine a place so rich in salt that it could produce a pillar symbolizing this ancient moment. And for centuries, people have pointed to these natural formations, wondering if one of them might indeed be the remnants of Lot's wife. Now, what about the spiritual significance of this transformation? In Luke 17:32, Jesus himself refers to the story of Lot's wife when he says, "Remember Lot's wife." He uses her story as a warning to those who hesitate or look back when God is calling them to move forward. Her transformation into a pillar of salt serves as a powerful reminder that turning back to the past, whether it's our old life, sinful ways, or even old comforts, can have serious consequences. Jesus makes it clear that there's a lesson to be learned from her, and it's not just a story about punishment. It's about the danger of being trapped in what we should be leaving behind. But here's a question. Did Lot's wife actually die when she was turned into a pillar of salt? From what we understand in the text, yes, this transformation marked the end of her earthly life. She was physically frozen in place, unable to continue the journey forward with her family. The exact nature of her death isn't described in detail, but the idea is that this pillar of salt became a permanent marker of what happens when we disobey God's call to move on. Now, the bigger theological question, will Lot's wife be resurrected on the last day? This is where it gets interesting. The Bible teaches that at the end of days, there will be a resurrection of the dead, as described in Daniel 12:2, which says, "Multitudes who sleep in the dust of the earth will awake, some to everlasting life, others to shame and everlasting contempt." In Christian theology, the idea of resurrection hinges on a person's faith in their relationship with God. So, will Lot's wife, having been turned into a pillar of salt, be resurrected? It's a tough question, and one that theologians have debated for a long time. On one hand, if we look at her story as one of disobedience and rebellion, it seems like a cautionary tale, suggesting that her fate was sealed. But on the other hand, the Bible speaks of God's grace and the possibility of redemption for all, even those who have made grave mistakes. So could Lot's wife, like so many others in the Bible, find grace and forgiveness in the end? It's a question we don't have a clear answer to, but it reminds us of the complexity of God's mercy and judgment. The pillar of salt that she became could also be seen as a kind of spiritual symbol. Salt itself was highly valued in ancient times. It was used to preserve food and was even part of religious offerings. Some scholars have speculated that Lot's wife turning into salt could symbolize her preservation in the narrative of Scripture, forever standing as a warning to others. Even today, when we hear her story, it prompts us to think about the importance of obedience, trust, and not getting stuck in the past. Ultimately, whether Lot's wife will be resurrected on the last day isn't explicitly answered in the Bible, but her story serves as a reminder of how our choices in life have lasting effects. And perhaps there's a sense that her story continues to live on through us. Every time we face a choice to look back or move forward, we remember her. Jesus' words in Luke 17:32 ring out again. Remember Lot's wife. It's a call not just to remember the consequences she faced, but to keep our eyes fixed on what lies ahead, trusting that God's plans for us are far greater than anything we've left behind. As we consider her fate, it's also worth remembering that God's mercy is often far beyond what we can comprehend. The Bible teaches us that God is not only just, but also loving and forgiving. So while Lot's wife's story ended in tragedy, it's possible that, like the rest of us, she may still find her place in God's plan for redemption. In the end, the pillar of salt stands as a physical and spiritual reminder. It's a marker of what happens when we look back instead of trusting in God's call to move forward. But it's also a reminder of the importance of living in the present, focusing on the journey ahead, and trusting in God's guidance, no matter how uncertain the future may seem. So, here we are. After everything we've unpacked about Lot's wife, the message is pretty clear. Sometimes to move forward, you really do have to let go of what's behind you. But don't think of it as a loss. Think of it as making room for what's coming next. And trust me, there's always something ahead, even if we can't quite see it yet. Lot's wife looked back, and that moment of hesitation turned her into a pillar of salt. A stark and unforgettable image, right? But for us, that's just the beginning of the lesson. It's not just about physical turning or looking behind you. It's about what's going on in your heart and mind. Maybe you're holding on to a past mistake, a missed opportunity, or even an old version of yourself. The real takeaway is this. When we keep looking back, we risk freezing in place, stuck in the past, unable to embrace the future. Think about it in your own life. What are you still holding on to that's keeping you from moving forward? Maybe it's an old relationship that didn't work out, but you keep checking up on your ex's social media just to see what they're up to, of course. Or maybe it's a missed opportunity at work, and you find yourself constantly replaying what you could have done differently. It's like watching a rerun of a game you already lost. What's the point? You know how it ends. It's time to switch the channel. And hey, we all have those moments of looking back with regret. But what if, instead of dwelling on it, you chose to focus on what lies ahead? That's the hopeful part of this story. Lot and his daughters had to keep moving forward, even though it was hard, even though they left so much behind. But in doing so, they made space for new beginnings. That's what happens when you stop looking back. You free yourself to move into the future. And let's face it, looking back doesn't change anything. Regret doesn't rewrite the past, and guilt doesn't fix old mistakes. What it does do, though, is weigh you down. So if there's one thing to take from Lot's wife's story, it's this. Don't let your past turn you into a pillar of salt. Instead, choose to walk forward, trusting that there's something better ahead. Let's lighten things up a bit. If you're still hung up on something from high school, like that one embarrassing moment during prom where you tripped in front of everyone, it's time to let it go. No one remembers it but you. Or maybe it's time to stop regretting that one thing you said in a meeting 5 years ago. Seriously, no one is still thinking about it except you. Leave it behind. It's like carrying around a backpack full of rocks for no reason. Just drop it. And let's not forget that moving forward doesn't mean you have to have it all figured out. Sometimes moving forward just means taking one step, even when you're not sure where it's leading. But here's the beautiful thing about faith. It's trusting that there's a path ahead, even if you can't see it yet. Lot's wife couldn't embrace what was ahead because she was too fixated on what was behind. Don't make the same mistake. So here's your call to action. Take a look at your own life and ask yourself, what am I still looking back at? Is it that relationship, that job, that mistake, or maybe even that embarrassing thing you did at a party once? Whatever it is, it's time to let it go. Don't let it keep you stuck in place. Leave it in the past where it belongs and take that next step forward, even if it's just a small one. In the end, the story of Lot's wife is one of warning, but it's also one of hope. While looking back might paralyze us, moving forward with faith opens the door to new possibilities. You never know what's waiting for you just around the corner. So keep your eyes ahead, leave the past behind, and trust that what's coming is worth the journey. Now go ahead and take that next step. Just make sure you're not turning around to check on that ex one more time, because trust me, it's time to move on. That's it, everyone. What do you think of Lot's wife's story and her fateful decision to look back? Which part resonated with you the most? Her attachment to the past, the warnings she ignored, or maybe the lesson we can all take from her journey? Share your thoughts in the comment section below. Have you ever had a moment where you were stuck looking back when you knew it was time to move forward? I'd love to hear your stories and how you overcame those moments of hesitation. And hey, let's keep this conversation going. What other stories from the Bible or life in general remind you of the struggle between holding on to the past and moving forward with hope? Let us know if there's another biblical figure or lesson you'd like to dive into next. These ancient stories still have so much to teach us about modern life, and I'd love to explore them with you. If you enjoyed today's message and want more insights, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and click the notification bell so you never miss an update. There's so much more to unpack from these stories, and trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Thanks for being part of this journey. Until next time, keep moving forward, keep trusting in the path ahead, and leave what's behind exactly where it belongs, back there. Let's grow together, one step at a time.